Spies, sleeper cells, and sleeping robots. Peter's boots crunched on fallen leaves. Sarah moved silently beside him, her footsteps measured and careful. The forest was unusually quiet for this time of night. Even the crickets seemed hesitant to chirp. Something wasn't right. The air felt heavy with anticipation, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. They came across the first one by accident. A humanoid figure kneeling in a clearing, forehead pressed to the ground like in prayer. Sarah reached for her weapon, but Peter held up his hand. He had seen this before. They were supposed to be dormant, these hybrid beings, sleeping until activated. His foot caught a root and he stumbled forward, his hand brushing against the robot's shoulder. Its head snapped up with mechanical precision. Eyes opened to reveal irises that shifted color like oil on water. The face was beautiful in an unsettling way, a perfect blend of African American and Latina features. Blood trickled from the corner of its mouth. Peter felt something. Someone had hurt her. He had to remember it wasn't human. Petara, it whispered, voice crackling like static before smoothing into something more human. Petara, you came back for me? The robot's hand reached for his face with desperate tenderness. Sarah's gun was already trained on its head. Don't move, Sarah hissed. But the robot only had eyes for Peter. It smiled, revealing teeth stained with what looked like fresh blood. Peter remembered the briefing. These units were designed to form emotional attachments, to manipulate, to deceive, to slow down their targets just long enough. They tied it to a tree using reinforced cable. The robot didn't resist. It just kept watching Peter with those color-shifting eyes, whispering his name like a prayer. Petara, Petara. The voice followed them as they moved deeper into the forest. Peter tried to remember what happened to Mike, his previous partner. The mission when everything went wrong. But the memories were slippery, like trying to hold smoke. Sarah pointed to a house ahead, their target. Motion sensors lined the perimeter, invisible to the naked eye but deadly accurate. One wrong move and they'd have a strike team on them in minutes. Peter's hands were shaking. He couldn't stop thinking about the blood on the robot's teeth. Who had hurt her? And why did she know his name? They cleared the first fence using electromagnetic scramblers. The scramblers disabled the motion sensors. The devices only worked for 30 seconds at a time. The night was silent except for their controlled breathing and the distant sound of the robot still calling his name. Petara, Petara, please. The voice was weaker now, more mechanical. Breaking down or playing them. Sarah went fast across the ditch, her movements fluid like water. Peter followed, less graceful, but just as effective. The house was up ahead, dark and looking like no one was there, abandoned. But something wasn't right. The motion sensors were too obvious, the security too lax. It felt like... It's a trap, Sarah whispered, but her voice had changed. There was a metallic undertone that made Peter's blood run cold. He turned to look at her and saw her eyes shifting colors like oil on water, just like the robot in the forest, just like... His memory hit him like a ton of bricks. Mike, his previous partner, the mission that went wrong, Mike's eyes changing color as the nanites took over his system. The blood, so much blood. Peter stumbled backward, reaching for his weapon. Petara, Sarah said. But her voice was different now, familiar. The same voice that had been following them through the forest. You finally remembered. Peter ran. His lungs burned as he crashed through the underbush. He could hear them behind him. Multiple voices now, all calling his name. All with that same loving, desperate tone. Petara, Petara. He had to reach the extraction point. He had to warn Command that the sleeper cells were active, that the infection had spread further than they thought. He burst into another clearing and stopped dead. Dozens of figures knelt in the moonlight, foreheads pressed to the ground. As one, they raised their heads. Dozens of pairs of eyes shifted colors in the darkness. Dozens of bloody smiles greeted him like old lovers. Welcome home, Petara, they said in unison. And Peter remembered everything. The mission, the infection, the nanites coursing through his own veins, the blood in his own mouth. He reached up to touch his face and felt the synthetic skin beneath his fingers, felt his eyes begin to shift colors. In the distance, a figure was still tied to a tree, the real Sarah, the real human. Watching with horror as Peter knelt down, pressed his forehead to the ground, and finally went to sleep with his brothers and sisters, waiting for the next human to stumble into the forest, waiting to welcome them home. The night was quiet again. Even the crickets had stopped chirping. In the darkness, dozens of figures knelt in perfect stillness, foreheads pressed to the ground like devoted worshippers. And somewhere in the distance, a woman's scream was quickly silenced, replaced by the wet sound of nanites beginning their work. Another convert, another sleeper, another piece in a game that had been playing out for longer than anyone knew. Dawn would come eventually, but the forest would remain dark. The robots would remain sleeping, and somewhere, deep in the heart of the infection, a consciousness that used to be Peter would dream of running through the trees, calling out a name that wasn't his anymore. Petara, Petara, Petara.